They said the Montgomery mansion had everything: marble floors, chandeliers brighter than stars, and silence so heavy it felt like power. But behind all that shine, there was a shadow no one dared to see. Her name was Camille. For 23 years, she served this house like air, always present, never acknowledged. Invisible, replaceable, forgotten, and maybe the world would have stayed blind to her forever, if not for one cruel moment. Because on that day, the millionaire's daughter, Ava, decided to humiliate her. Not with rage, not with fists, but with words sharp enough to cut through dignity. Camille stayed quiet. She always did. But her silence? It wasn't weakness. It was a mask, hiding a story of sacrifice and pain the mansion walls had never heard. And as Ava's voice echoed through the polished halls, she didn't know her cruelty had an audience. Someone was listening. Someone powerful. Someone who would never look at her, or this house, the same way again. The sound of glass crashing filled the mansion. A vase had fallen and shattered into pieces on the floor. Camille quickly bent down. Her hands moved slowly, carefully, as she picked up the sharp shards. She didn't look up. She didn't speak. This wasn't the first time she had swallowed her pain in silence. Above her stood Ava, 17 years old. Pretty, rich, and cruel. She crossed her arms and smirked. Seriously? You can't even hold a vase? Do you know why you're here? Not because you're good at your job. You're here because my dad feels sorry for you. Camille stayed quiet. She always stayed quiet. Her silence had become her only protection. But what Ava didn't know was that this time she wasn't speaking into the air. This time, someone was listening. Richard Montgomery, the father, the man who built this mansion. He had come home early, and as he walked past the sitting room, he stopped. Through the half-open door, he saw it all. His daughter, standing tall, full of venom, and Camille, kneeling on the ground, holding on to her dignity while Ava crushed it with every word. Ava's voice cut again like a knife. You should be grateful you even have a roof over your head. My things aren't disposable. Even if you are. Richard's heart sank. This wasn't the little girl who once cried if someone hurt a butterfly. This wasn't the child who used to sit on his lap and ask him questions about the stars. This was someone else. This was cruelty, and it lived in his own daughter. In that moment, a terrible truth hit him. Maybe Ava didn't turn cruel by accident. Maybe she learned it right here, inside this mansion, under his roof, under his silence. Camille finally lifted her eyes, not with anger, not with tears, but with quiet strength. That one look shook Richard more than Ava's words ever could, because now he knew. Camille's pain wasn't new. It was old. It was heavy. And it had been ignored for far too long. Richard gripped the doorframe. Frozen. Broken. The mansion he thought was perfect. The life he thought he had built was already poisoned. Richard realized his perfect life was nothing but a lie. And the worst part? The poison was not outside. It was inside his own home. Inside his own daughter. Shaped by him. Camille's world was small. Tucked away in the laundry room, a space no one else ever cared about, a wooden bench, a sink, and one faded photograph taped to the wall. In the picture, Camille was younger, her arms wrapped around her daughter Diane, both smiling, both full of life. That smile didn't last. Diane died in a car accident 8 years ago, leaving behind a little girl, Ella. Since then, Camille worked day and night, raising her granddaughter alone. Every plate she washed, every floor she scrubbed, it all went to keeping Ella fed, clothed, and in school. Camille had once dreamed of being a teacher. She loved reading, writing, telling stories. But dreams didn't pay bills. When tragedy hit, she traded her pen for a mop, her voice for silence. Upstairs, Ava was live streaming from her marble bathroom, her face glowing under perfect light. Some people stay poor because they're lazy. Period. It's all about mindset, she bragged. Thousands of fans sent hearts and comments, calling her inspiring. None of them noticed Camille in the background, quietly cleaning, invisible as always. But someone noticed. Richard did. He started watching more closely now. He saw Ava posing for her videos while Camille carried the vacuum. He saw Ava preaching positivity while treating Camille like she was nothing. And each time, the pit in his stomach grew heavier. Because as he watched, memories returned. Ava hadn't always been like this. She used to be gentle, kind, even soft. He remembered her as a little girl with sand in her hair, running on the beach, laughing, until her belly hurt. He remembered how she cried if a bird fell from its nest, how she'd sit in his lap and ask endless questions about the stars. That little girl was gone, and in her place stood someone he didn't recognize. Someone cruel. Someone who made him wonder if he had lost his daughter a long time ago. Richard stood silently in the hall, haunted not just by who Ava was now, but by the memory of who she used to be. Dinner was quiet that night. Too quiet. For the first time in years, Richard sat at the table before anyone else. He didn't scroll through his phone. He didn't look at the papers beside him. He just waited. Ava came in late, silk pajamas draped over her, her phone glowing in her hand. She plopped into the chair across from him, sighing like she was already bored. Richard didn't take his eyes off her. "We need to talk." She smirked. "About what?" "About the way you treat people in this house." His voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut through the silence. Ava laughed lightly, rolling her eyes. "Oh God, is this about Camille again?" "Dad, she takes things too personally." "No," Richard snapped. "You do." The words stunned her. He had never spoken to her like that before. "You treat her like she's less than you," he continued. "That isn't just rude, Ava. That's cruel." Ava tried to brush it off. "She's the help. This is literally her job." Richard leaned forward, his eyes burning into hers. "And you're supposed to be human." The room went silent. Ava's jaw tightened, but she had nothing to say. For the first time, her father wasn't smiling at her, wasn't indulging her, wasn't on her side. Richard pushed his chair back slowly. He didn't yell. He didn't slam the table. He just stood up, his disappointment heavier than any raised voice could ever be. Without another word, he walked out of the dining room. Ava sat frozen, her fork untouched. His respect, something she had always taken for granted, suddenly felt fragile, maybe even gone. Upstairs, Richard shut himself inside his study. The quiet wrapped around him like chains. His eyes fell on a framed photo sitting on the shelf. Ava at the beach years ago, no taller than his waist, her hair full of sand, laughing with pure joy. His late wife stood behind them, her arms around both. Richard picked up the photo, his hands trembling. He had given Ava everything: money, safety, the best schools. But not the things that mattered most. Not values. Not humility. Not his time. And in that moment, the truth he had been running from hit him hard. Ava's cruelty hadn't appeared out of nowhere. It had grown here, inside his home, fed by his silence, nurtured by his neglect. The empire he was so proud of meant nothing now, because the one thing he had failed to build was his own daughter. The next afternoon, the house was quiet. Camille was dusting shelves in the sunlit sitting room when Ava walked in, a pink journal clutched in her hand. Her tone was sharp, mocking. "How many times do I have to tell you? Don't touch my things. Were you snooping through this?" Camille looked up, calm as ever. "It was on the shelf. I was dusting. I didn't open it." Ava rolled her eyes. Please, you probably don't even know how to read this kind of stuff anyway. It's not for people like you. Camille straightened her back. Her voice was steady, quiet, but it carried weight. People like me? Yeah, Ava snapped. People who clean up after others for a living. People who don't belong here. For the first time, Camille didn't lower her eyes. She didn't let the words pass over her. She met Ava's glare head-on. You don't know a thing about my life. And you've never asked. All I want is one thing in this house, respect. The words landed heavy. And in that exact moment, Richard stepped into the doorway. He had come home early again, unnoticed. His face was stern, his presence cold. Ava! His voice cut through the room like a blade. She spun around, startled. Dad, I didn't know you were here. Go to your room. Now. The sharpness in his tone left no room for argument. Ava's cheeks flushed with anger and shame, but she turned and stormed off without another word. Richard stood still, his eyes fixed on Camille. For the first time, he wasn't just seeing her as part of the background. He was seeing her strength, quiet, controlled, but unshakable. That silence of hers wasn't weakness. It was power. He took a step closer, his voice softer now. Camille, I need to hear it. I need you to tell me the truth. Richard stayed quiet, waiting. For years he had passed Camille in the halls, nodded politely, handed her envelopes at Christmas, and never once asked about her life. Now, for the first time, he wanted to hear her voice. Camille set down the cloth she had been holding and folded her hands in front of her. She didn't look small. She didn't look weak. She looked like someone who had carried the weight of silence too long. When I first came to work here, she began softly, your daughter was just a little girl. Bright-eyed, demanding, yes, but curious. Your wife was polite to me. You were distant, but respectful. I accepted that. I knew my role. Richard nodded slowly, but Camille's eyes stayed locked on his. Her voice grew firmer. But over time, respect became silence, and silence became invisibility. I wasn't a person anymore. I was just part of the house. Richard's throat tightened, but Camille didn't stop. 8 years ago, my daughter died. A car accident. I buried her on a Saturday, and I came back here on Monday morning. No one asked why my eyes were red. No one noticed. That year, you gave me a generous bonus. Do you know what it paid for? Richard's lips parted, but no words came. It paid for her coffin, Camille said. Her tone didn't rise. It didn't crack. But the weight of those words hit like a stone. Richard closed his eyes, pain flashing across his face. Camille's voice stayed steady. Ava is cruel. But she didn't invent cruelty. She learned it. She learned it by watching what this house allows. She learned that people like me don't matter. That kindness is optional. That having money means being above others. Richard's chest ached. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but he couldn't. Every word was true, and he knew it. Camille leaned in slightly, her eyes sharp now. I don't blame her fully. She's young. She can change. But you, she paused, her words cutting deeper than any insult could. You had the power to make this a different home. And you didn't. The room went silent. Richard felt the weight of it pressing down on him, forcing him to face the truth he had avoided for years. He wasn't just a bystander. He was the root. Richard leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, looking more tired than Camille had ever seen him. For years he had been the man in control, the one with all the answers. But right now, he looked like someone carrying a weight he couldn't hide anymore. He pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table. His voice was low, steady. This isn't a bonus. And it's not charity. It's what I owe you. And it's only the beginning. Camille looked at it, but didn't move. Money doesn't change people, Mr. Montgomery. Richard nodded. You're right. It doesn't, but maybe it can help me change direction. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I want to ask you something. Not as your employer. As a father. Camille tilted her head slightly. What is it? I want you to speak to Ava, Richard said. She doesn't listen to me anymore. Not really, but she might listen to you. She needs to hear the truth. Your truth. Not anger. Not excuses. Just the truth. Camille studied him. You want me to give her what you couldn't? Richard swallowed hard. Yes, because I failed. And if someone doesn't reach her now, I'm afraid I'll lose her completely. The room was still. Finally, Camille nodded once. If she comes to me with humility, I'll talk. But not before. Neither of them realized they weren't alone. Upstairs, on the staircase, Ava stood frozen. She had heard everything. Her father's disappointment. Camille's strength. The truth about her own cruelty. For the first time in her life, her stomach sank. Shame. Fear. She wasn't used to those feelings, but now they gripped her tight. For the first time, she wasn't sure her father's respect would always be hers. Her chest tightened as she gripped the railing. Pride screamed at her to walk away, to pretend none of this mattered. But another voice whispered inside her, one she couldn't ignore. She had to choose. Keep hiding behind arrogance, or face Camille, the woman she had spent years trying to silence. Ava stood at the bottom of the stairs, frozen. Her chest was tight, her pride screaming at her to turn around. But her father's voice, Camille's words, they kept echoing in her head. For the first time, she felt something she had never truly felt before: shame. Slowly, she walked toward the kitchen. Camille was there, quietly wiping down the counter like she always did. Ava's voice came out smaller than she expected. Camille. Camille looked up, calm, steady. Yes. Ava hesitated, her hands twisting together. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Camille didn't speak. She just watched her. Ava's throat went dry, but she forced herself to go on. When Mom died, I felt like the ground disappeared under me. Dad was always gone, and I didn't know how to handle it. So I tried to control things. I tried to control people. It made me feel like I had power. But really, it just made me cruel. Especially to you. Her voice broke. I hurt you, and you didn't deserve it. Camille set down the cloth in her hands. Her tone stayed even. You treated me like I wasn't here. Like I was invisible. But I was here, Ava. Every day. Invisibility is its own kind of cruelty. You don't need fists or shouting to erase someone. All it takes is choosing not to see them. Ava's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she really looked at Camille. Not as the maid, not as the background, but as a woman who had given everything and lost even more just to survive. Her voice trembled. You've given so much to this house, and I never once asked what it cost you. Camille stayed silent, her gaze steady. Ava wiped at her face quickly. Would you share your story? She asked. Not for my followers. Not for show. For me. For people who need to hear the truth. So they don't grow up blind like I did. Camille didn't answer right away. She studied Ava's face, searching for something real. And that's when Ava realized an apology wasn't enough. Cutting back on social media wasn't enough. Staying in this mansion wasn't enough. If she wanted to change, truly change, she would have to leave behind the comfort that made her cruel. She would have to step into a world that didn't bow to her name. For the first time in her life, Ava understood. Real growth meant letting go of the life she thought defined her. The Montgomery mansion still looked perfect. Marble floors shining, chandeliers glowing, staff moving quietly like always. But inside, things had changed. Ava packed her bags with no noise, no drama. No expensive luggage, no selfies, no fake goodbyes online. Just a backpack and a bus ticket. She told her father she was leaving for Atlanta. There's a youth center there. No cameras, no filters. I need to work. I need to learn who I am without all of this. Richard didn't try to stop her. For once, he saw his daughter choosing something real. Not for attention, not for likes, but for herself. He nodded. If you're ready to earn it, then go. Camille stayed. But she wasn't the same woman anymore. She wasn't invisible. People said her name now. They looked her in the eye. She moved through the mansion with quiet pride. No longer just the shadow in the corner. Richard started changing too. One morning, he walked into the kitchen with an envelope in his hand. He placed it on the table in front of Camille. "This isn't for you," he said. "It's for Ella. Her school, her books, whatever she needs. Not a gift, a responsibility. Mine." Camille stared at the envelope for a moment, then gave a small nod. She understood. This wasn't charity. This was him finally making things right. Weeks later, a letter arrived from Ava. Short, shaky handwriting. "I cried today. A little girl here reminded me of Camille. Someone was talking down to her. I couldn't stay quiet. I defended her. For the first time, I felt like I did something real." Camille read the letter slowly. She didn't smile wide, but there was a softness in her face. Ava was changing. Slowly, painfully, but she was. That night, Camille sat by the window with a book in her hand. Not hiding it, not rushing to put it away if someone walked in. Richard passed by, saw her reading, and asked gently, "Good book?" She looked up, her voice steady. "Very." And in that moment, something inside her settled. The mansion's silence no longer erased her. It gave her space. Space to exist, to be seen, to be heard. Camille was no longer just part of the furniture in the Montgomery house. She was a voice, a story, a presence that could never again be ignored.